what is the true cost of rebellion? Even at winning, what do you still lose? You can lose the very nature of who you are. And in this episode, we get so many moments and important one-liners that kind of highlight the risk and the elevation of everything going on. I'm really excited to break this one down. So hit that like button and let's jump right in. The episode opens with Wilma and Pac getting off a transport that's landing at the Yavin Rebel base. It's now 2 BBY, and what does that mean? That means in this arc, we're going to get the Gorman Massacre, and so everything in this episode is inching us closer toward that end. But Wilmon has a very specific purpose. He's there to recruit Cassian. This, I must mention, felt more like a huge jump from where we ended previously, and I know it was all done to condense everything down. That was going to be 5 seasons. I understand why they've done it that way. I think that's still the right choice, but here in this time jump, it just feels disjointed. Everything in Andor season 1, it felt like when a decision was made, we saw the consequences of that direct decision, and it built and built and built and built like a huge house of cards that came crashing together at the end. This feels like a pretty big jump from where we were. We're like, the whole Rebel base is now built up in a year. Now Cassian and Bix are hiding out there. Wilmon's coming to get them. There's been a divide and a big change between the relationship of Cassian, Bix, and Vel to Luthen. Like, what is really going on? Maybe we're going to see that in the next episode, because I haven't watched it yet. I'm taking these one at a time because I like being able to react and theorize a little bit in each of these episodes and find out if we're right with what's going to happen. Usually we're not. That's okay though, right? And I say this because I want it to be understood that Andor isn't perfect. There is nothing that's perfect. There's going to be things that we each look at and go, nah, I didn't love that as much, or that isn't exactly how I would have preferred it. And it's these 1 year time jumps that feel to me just a little bit almost too jarring. There's some stuff that's happened that obviously we're not going to get exposition about everything, but it really doesn't quite make sense right as this is opening, right as we're going into it. There feels like there's a story that was told off screen that we didn't get to see. Cassian is still injured from some kind of blaster burn or shot that he took. We don't know what, but he is feeling it. And it kind of is funny because as I'm sitting here, I'm going like, yeah, you're a year older, bud. Feel it. It gets worse as you get older, but I know that's not really what's happening. They're trying to show us that he's been in the fight. He's been going through things. He's not just been relaxing here on this Rebel base. He's been involved and moving, but there's some issues. He's taken shots. Wilmon comes up and kind of interrupts a little bit of spicy time between Cassian and Bix. And Wilmon brings forward the plan to say, hey, we need to go get Dedra Miro. She is on Gorman and she's vulnerable. This is our time to take her out, to take a blow at the enemy. Cassian presses Wilmon to find out where he's been. We know where he's been. He's been with Saw Gerrera. He's been huffing the rhodium. He's been kind of doing the crazy, go at it your own, fight the Empire type of life. Luthen knows that that's where he was, and I'm sure he was kind of still in conjunction with Luthen during that time. Yet it seems that Bix and Cassian have separated away from Luthen to some degree. They've jumped in with this larger group of rebels who are on Yavin 4. As Cassian's pressing to find out more, he hears that Wilmon has told Luthen that Cassian's been injured. So even this disconnect between Luthen and Cassian goes far enough that they just have no contact, no communication, and Luthen's been trying to get a hold of Cassian, so it seems to be there's something that happened between them, and it can't just be the way we left things, because the way we left things was a final mission where Bix and Cassian blew up the Imperial Navy facility where Dr. Gorst was doing his interrogations. So there's something that's happened in all of that that we're not sure of that has caused all of this. But then Wilmon makes a really good point about, hey, you're taking on all this risk. And Cassian then says a really important line that I think shows you his mentality and how it's shifted.
You want to fight? Or you want to win? Going it alone doesn't cut it anymore.
fighting versus winning is really what Cassian is about. He's not about just going and doing these things to cause problems, to just fight the Empire. He wants to win the war. And I don't think Luthen doesn't want to win, but he definitely has a different way of going about it, his own way of keeping the circle really small and really tight, whereas now Cassian and Bix have joined this larger force that are taking risks every day, and that's what they get reminded by Wilmon. I really enjoy that aspect of this, kind of reminding us that as this rebellion grows more and more, they're taking on more and more risk. I recently talked about in a previous video about how rebellions fail, and one of the things that causes rebellions to fail is betrayal or people that aren't committed. And so they're having a hard time vetting all of these new recruits who are joining them, and how many of them could be spies, how many of them are really bought in. I love this idea, this back and forth, this thought being brought forward, showing how everything is getting more and more and more risky. And then we get a shot of Palmo. The city square is empty, it's fortified. They've only let a few propaganda reporters in as they're telling their version of events at a recent explosion that you could see the smoke still rising in the sky, saying no terrorist group has claimed that they've done this. And we're going to find out later in the episode that it doesn't sound like a terrorist group did this. It's really feeling like this is the beginning of the movement, of the plan, of really the twofold plan of a rising tension of terrorist groups alongside this propaganda that's now all coming to a head and is going to probably explode in the next few episodes. All this while we see Sirill Karn walking, and he's clearly distraught, clearly upset, clearly frustrated at what's actually going on because he's in the dark from all of it. And I think that's a big storyline in this whole episode that we only touch base on once or twice. But what is going on with Sirill Karn? Is he really fighting this internal battle? Is he seeing the flaws in the way that the Imperials are going about doing this? Is he understand now that he's being lied to by Dedra and everyone around him that he thought he could trust? Is this betrayal going to become evident to him, and will he do something about it? I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with that over the next few episodes, because I do believe there is an alternate universe or a story path, whatever you want to call it, that Sirill Karn ends up doing something to undermine what the Imperials are trying to accomplish, even though he's going to be told to not do anything other than pack and get out of there. But we'll get to that in a moment. And now Wilmon reveals the real reason he's there, but again, a one-line moment that just kind of builds what's going on, where Wilmon says,
it's the Empire with the torches. They've gone insane.
They know that what's going on is really being driven by the Imperials under the guise of all of this propaganda saying that it's terrorist attacks. And so not only is Wilmon able to see this, this is what Sirill is seeing, this understanding and idea that the people on the ground know the truth, but the rest of the galaxy have no clue what's really going on. All the narrative is controlled by the Empire. This is the plan that was laid out at the beginning with Krennic and Dedra, and we're seeing it come to fruition now. And Wilmon then is going to reveal that the whole plan here is to try and go assassinate Dedra Meero. One of the lines we get from Wilmon Pack as Cassian is leaving in frustration,
"You act like Luthen's the enemy."
That would be easier.
Again, there's something that's gone on here that is showing the cracks in the Rebel Alliance, and I love that they're doing that. I just wish we didn't get it off screen. I want to know what the pain is between the two of them. What has gone on since that last mission? And I know I said it earlier, but this is what I mean when I'm saying I think that they left too much to interpretation. Maybe we'll get a flashback. It doesn't feel like that's how it's going to operate. Maybe we'll get some exposition around what actually has happened. But either way, we're just going to have to keep moving on with this episode. And then back to Dedra as she's talking with Pendergrass, and he's outlining a whole bunch of things that are going to happen next.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
It's time for the forced resettlement of the Gorman people. This is what we know has been coming, but there's still one thing that they have to make sure happens, that Sirill Karn has no idea what's about to happen.
We are moving forward with the original plan.
Pendergrass outlines how this is a good thing for Dedra, how there's so much that's growing and she's going to gain so much from this as long as she can follow through with the intended plan. And it's not a mistake that as soon as that scene ends, we're jumping to Sirill. They're trying to show how like what's happening is so secretive over here and Sirill wants to know, but this declaration of martial domain is what they've been working toward, because then they can do whatever they need to do to say, hey, you can't control your government anymore. You can't control your people. We're going to do whatever is needed. And the Senate and the galaxy is going to be like, yeah, of course, there's terrorists running all over the place. You have to step in and fix it. But it's not so easy to swallow that pill, as I think Sirill Karn has laid down more roots in Gorman than he's letting on. Sirill Karn is asking questions, and he's not one to let a lead fall. He's not one to just sit back and be told to do nothing and listen. Think back to Morlana 1 when he was told, just let it go. This is better for your career. This is better for everything. We have an investigation and an audit. We just have to just pretend it didn't happen. And Sirill Karn's like, no, 2 corpos died. We can't let this go. And it feels like it's the same. He's not getting the information from Dedra that he wants. He's finding out that, hey, everything we've been doing is a sham. We've accomplished nothing, yet you're saying we're going to be rewarded greatly? What is going on? If it's outside agitators, isn't that kind of what I was here to investigate, to find out? If we were going to chase down these outside agitators, what he's realizing is what he was told to do is different from what they needed. Really, they just needed to keep tabs and use him to feed them information to be able to pull together what they want. They're not really trying to chase down these outside agitators. They're not using the Gorman front to chase down Axis the way probably that he thought they would be. Instead, this is all an elaborate setup. He smells it. He sees it. Will he sit by and let it happen? I love how they're using the travel time to both show what's happening and tell what's happening by having these news reports playing over and kind of layering so you can hear every news angle. Everyone's reporting the same curated propaganda.
With reports of another terrorist attack overnight as a series of explosions.
Saying that, hey, this is what's happening. This is how it's going. They need to put up a complete blockade because of all these terrorists, because of the explosion at the depot, blah, 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 blah. Everyone's getting their news and it's all kind of tainted and skewed in one way. But we get that all just as we see Mon Mothma walking in to the Senate building. I think that's a really good use of movement, of world building, and of exposition, all in just a 30-second scene that really kind of brings the frustration and temperature to a boiling point, especially as we're going to see the senator from Gorman meet with Mon Mothma. Now the tone is different. From the last time they met, he was staunch in saying, hey, we're not doing anything. We're telling everyone to stay still, to not move forward. And now he's kind of apologizing and saying thank you to everything that Mon Mothma has been trying to accomplish. You can see she's visibly moved in these moments because there aren't many that are thankful for what she's doing. She's kind of pushing a boulder up a hill, so to speak, and trying to bring about change, even though it feels like everything is against her. But it's the last line as the music begins to swell, we hear him say, protect yourself. Protect yourself. Again, it's just everything that's happening, scene after scene after scene in this episode is starting to build and show how the risk is ratcheting up higher and higher and higher. Every decision, every thought, every movement is now bringing with it so much more risk. Well, now we get a really brief scene that I think is incredibly important. That, it could just be used as a transition to get us back to Gorman. We know that's where Dedra Meero is. We know that's where the headquarters that was built, this kind of building, the security place on Palmo. But more importantly, where is Dedra standing? She's standing at the window. She's looking out over the square. She's just standing there, arms behind her back, a good soldier, just observing and watching and thinking. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, how is this important? They've just used this to get us back to Gorman because the next scene is the Gorman front having their conversation as they're trying to figure out what to do. But just Think for a moment what has been said and how this episode goes. I mean, you're watching this because you've already watched it. But if she's standing in front of that window, when we get to the end of the episode, what are we going to see? We're going to see Cassian in his hotel room scoping out a sniper shot. And this is setting up an idea and an understanding of this is the intel that Wilmon's going to give, that Dedra just stands there. She's going to go to different places. She'll move around, but she's often seen in this window, in this perch. It's almost reminiscent of how she stood at her window in her apartment looking out over Coruscant. This is her thinking position. This is her plotting place, whatever you want to call it. I think it just sets up, there's a risk. There's a risk for Dedra even to be standing in a place she feels is safe. There's a number of one-liners that come out of this meeting with the Gorman front that I think are really important. And the first one is happening as they're getting a little angry and frustrated. It's like, you brought this about. You want to do this. But their dad is trying to say, listen, peaceful resistance is not pretending. You can bring about peaceful resistance that actually brings a change. And he's fighting for that understanding. But yet they're like, no, we need military resistance. We need to push. We need to fight back. And as they're getting frustrated, my guy, I think his name is Loris, I'll correct it if not, but he screams at the table and says, enough, we can't be fighting like this. In fact, he says one of the best lines, I think, in this whole conversation. He starts talking about how they're the people of Gore, and if they take that from us, what's worth saving? I think this line, this idea, at what point of a rebel pushback are we losing who we truly are? When do we become the evil that we're fighting against? And I think this is the tension that is really a part of this entire show. That's kind of the tension between Luthen and Saw Gerrera and Mon Mothma and the others. What is the best way to fight a rebellion? And at what point do you become the very same thing that you're fighting? Just the evil, the anger, the frustration, the pain that you bring about. At what cost are you supposed to fight? These are really deep things to be thinking about when you're talking about rebellion, when you're talking about these characters growing and maturing. And I think this is maybe the divide between Luthen and Cassian. That Cassian sees Luthen's way is not really an end, that it's just going to end in disaster for even just who you are, versus this understanding and idea of we still have to fight in such a way to win without losing ourselves in the process. But I'm not quite sure how you really can do that. Well, then we come to the Force in Andor. That's right, the Force shows up in Andor in the form of a Force healer who is really one of the cooks on Yavin 4, who's probably been in hiding this whole time, isn't a Jedi, just a Force sensitive, someone who's able to do some healing. And I would imagine that these are the type of people that would be used very frequently in situations like this, in battle places, in areas that would need a lot of help, in places that people are going to be injured and hurt. I do have some questions and wonder about this person and how they learned those things. Again, we're in this post Order 66 time frame. So when and how did this all come about? And all of that is really intriguing to me. And I know we're not going to get any of that. And I don't have a problem if it is another Jedi who survived Order 66 or someone who was just on a different place who was in hiding. It does kind of feel challenging, though, at times when you introduce characters like this without any backstory, without any understanding. They're just supposed to be there. So I can push back on this a little bit, but I'm glad they used it because it brings into the universe and brings into the understanding that Cassian has a very important path to walk, that he's the messenger, that he's kind of collecting all of this as he's going throughout his life's journey. That's what we've seen in season 1. I'm not quite sure how that prophecy plays out in the rest of this show or into Rogue One. I'm wondering if this is some of the language that Tony Gilroy said, you're going to look at Rogue One even in a new light, in a better light. Is that some of who Cassian is and some of his character is and his purpose? He finds his purpose here in Andor so that it makes sense a little bit more in Rogue One. Why he's willing to go to the lengths that he is to risk what he's going to risk for the sake of destroying the Death Star. All of that, I think, is tied up in this, and it is the title of the episode. So the Cassian being revealed as the messenger, the one who's going to carry this kind of message forward. What is the message? Is the message about the rebellion? Is the message something different? Is the message like what we're just hearing from the Gorman front? This idea of not losing ourselves in the midst of rebellion. What are we actually fighting for? How are we actually going to win? Is he more measured, or is he going to go all the length that Luthen and Saw go to? I think all of that is tied up in what we're looking at here. And then we get a really interesting scene with Sirill K talking to Enza, where he's saying something about, my people think this is outside agitators. If I had something to give them to prove that, and smack, he gets hit in the face. I think this is Sirill who's been playing both sides. He's been drawing closer and closer to Enza and somewhat being a double agent. I think she knows he's more connected to the ISB than anyone else. And they've been trying to go about this in a certain way to avoid all of those things, where he's been gaining their trust by doing things like that, which is really interesting because I have a feeling this is something that Dedra wouldn't know about. This is kind of showing some of Sirill's own, like, I'm going to do these things. I'm going to go about it a little bit my own way, not just strictly follow orders, which again is another feather in the cap of, I think Sirill is going to do something drastic. I'm more convinced of it after a scene like this. He's not just going to go back and pack his bags and be ready when Dedra calls for him to fly off a Gorman. Cassian has a massive distrust of the Force. He sees it almost as a scam, that this lady is a charlatan, but he knows something happened. He felt something happen. She approached him across the way, drew near to him, and called him a messenger. Even Bix says, I've had dreams like that. I know something happened. Something's going on. And I think all of this is building up to a larger purpose for Cassian to be pulled in. It's not enough just for him to hate the Empire and want to win. He's got to learn his role in all of this, because in a moment we're going to see he still doesn't want to live into this role of really fitting into the rebellion the way that other people are going to fit in. And then we get our next Rogue One cameo as General Draven is approaching Cassian as he's about to fly off in the U-Wing. Yes, we get to see the ship that Cassian will have in Rogue One as well. Does that mean we're getting closer to seeing K2SO meet Cassian for the first time? It has to mean, right? We're getting closer to all of that. But we have this line where Cassian now is having a conversation. He's getting ready to leave, and he says this.
The day I need permission to come and go, I'm gone.
That day is near.
That day is getting closer. There's something that's going to happen in Cassian that he really buys in all the way to obey the orders he's going to be given, because eventually he's going to obey the orders all the way to do things that he thinks maybe wouldn't even be a good thing to do, but he's going to obey those orders regardless. So how do we get the Cassian that we have now that at least is bought into the rebellion, but yet not really following orders? He's bucked away from Luthen. He's not really bought into what's happening on Yavin 4. He still comes and goes as he pleases to do what he thinks is most important. And at what point is he finally going to maybe see that Mon Mothma is the leader that he has to follow? I think that's going to come all of a result of what we see through the Gorman Massacre. The new reinforcements have made it to Gorman, and Dedra is not pleased, especially when you see the state of them.
Get these men shaped up and ready for presentation.
There's not a man amongst them, sir, but I'll do what I can.
They look like children.
And I think this is going to set up some mistakes that they're going to make. It's going to be sloppy. It's not going to be good. Everything's not going to be clean and neat. They're not really sending the best of the best, because this is going to just be a hack job. It doesn't need to be that great when you have all the reporting and the propaganda doing everything else you need it to. They're not going to put more reinforcements into this than they think they need. And so they're just shooting some rookies off to Gorman to make it all kind of go. It feels like these guys are going to be the fall guys. They know that there's weapons. They're counting on a confrontation, and they're kind of just going to sacrifice this group. It feels like they're going to be set up to be the ones that get killed as a result of everything that happened. They're not going to sacrifice seasoned veterans who might actually win. They're counting on the rebels actually winning in this next fight, or at least that's kind of how I think it's going to go. Now, this may not seem like a big scene because we get this moment with Cassian flying low over the trees. His Wilmon pack is holding on for his dear life, but I love little snippets like this. We already knew that Cassian was a pilot. It's part of the reason he was even recruited to the Aldhani heist. He could fly the freighter. They had no idea how to do any of that. And so we see some of the expertise here. We don't have to see him training. We don't have to see any of that, but we're getting little snippets to build out his character so that by the time we get to Rogue One, we understand these are the things he's good at. This is what his skill set actually is and why he's so highly valued by the rebels and Luthen and those who are in the know to get things done. Then we have Bix now talking to Vel. Vel is there actually to talk to her. Bix thinks she's there to find Cassian, but in reality, they're trying to really just get to the heart of the matter. What's going on with Cassian? Is he really bought in? They were getting ready to promote him to a different level in the whole organization and the whole setup. They trust him, but then he goes and does this rogue kind of thing with Wilmon where he just gets up and leaves and is unwilling to kind of obey orders. But it's this line that Vel says that I think is really important.
We're not Luthen's puppets anymore. We're not a bunch of maniacs running around Aldhani. We're building a real army.
What is now Luthen's role in all of this? I'm assuming we're going to see some of that in the following episodes. Like I said earlier, I've only watched this first one. But what is Luthen's role in what's going to happen, and how is he still in control? Or is he completely out of it at this point, which would feel very strange? But to say that we're no longer Luthen's puppets, they've graduated to something more. They've kind of walked away from Luthen. Did they think he was too much of a risk? Was he getting too kind of controlling and everything else? Or is he still just working with Lonnie? Is that all that's left? Vel, obviously working after losing Cinta, has kind of stepped away. Now she's just vetting all the new recruits and kind of putting the fear of God in them as they show up to make sure that there is no one there who's going to be an informant or a problem or who at least can fit the cause. So I think these storylines are showing how Cassian is trying to be made into a leader, but yet he's not there yet. He's not the one that they can truly trust. And again, I said this maybe a few minutes earlier in the episode, I don't think it's actually going to happen until Cassian sees Mon Mothma as the leader who's going to bring this all together. I think that's going to be the galvanizing force that makes him step into line. But we're just going to have to wait and see. This whole mission is deeply personal for Wilmon and for Cassian, and we see that in their kind of hug as they're separated and getting the comms set up, because Wilmon says Ferrix, and how does Cassian respond? He says stone and sky. And really what that is this is what was being chanted at the funeral, stone and sky, stone and sky. And so it's just this deep inherent connection back to that place that they want to get Dedra, because she's the one who really brought about all of the problem there on Ferrix. And so this is really kind of trying to close that chapter and put a seal and a stamp on what had happened there. And that's why the rebel leaders are not so happy with Cassian going rogue, because they're not quite seeing how this plays into everything, but it's really going to just be another piece in the whole mess that's going to be the Gorman Massacre. And then as Cassian is checking into the hotel, the one at the front desk is the Bellhop from previous times when he came to Gorman, who he kind of recognizes, hey, I know who this is, and he gives Cassian a warning. His card was not stamped by the Imperials, showing that he wasn't there with their knowledge, and they turn over their guest list to the Imperials so they know who's coming and going. He has till next afternoon. He's given that warning. He's given that state. There's kind of this smile between them, and he says, you got to carry your own bags this time. That's how we know that it's the same guy. He knows what's going on, and he's trying to help as best he can while not getting out of line. Then we get a shot. Basically, the rest of the episode is Cassian in his hotel room looking at everything going on, and he's kind of scoping out the building where we saw Dedra Meero standing in the window before. Now, he doesn't see her right now. He sees everything else, but he does hear and catch that there's stormtroopers up on the roof, so he knows that this is going to be a challenge that he might not be able to get away from. He's going to need some cover. He's going to need some chaos going on so that he can take this shot. And I think that's where Wilmon and the Gorman Front are going to come in to make this all happen. But we're going to have to wait and see that on the next episode. Some of my just closing thoughts about this episode, I think it's just ratcheting up the risk in so many different ways. We see so many moments, even things like saying Stone and Sky connected back to Ferrix, that we're no longer Luthen's puppets. If they take that from us, what's worth saving? If we lose who we really are, is any of this worth it? I think that is such an important thought and question in this entire show, is how do we retain who we are while this rebellion continues? And I think that's going to be the interesting storyline going into the next few episodes, to see how the Gorman rebels respond, how Cassian goes about this, how is this rebellion built, and how do we cheer for the rebels without them becoming the very thing that we're cheering against. Those are some of my thoughts. Those are some of my ideas. Would love to hear some of your perspective down below. Is Sirill Karn really going to flip? Is he going to go all Morlana 1 and turn into kind of the one who won't do the wrong thing perceived by him? He's going to maybe go against the Empire and Dedra. We know we've seen him in pictures being out there during the protest. What's going to happen? How is he going to bring that all about? I'm interested to see that storyline. I'm interested to see how does this bring about Mon Mothma leaving the Senate. We're going to see that in the next few episodes, as well as I think this continued arc for Cassian. How is he going to come to the realization? Is he going to take the shot or not? I think that's still up for debate, but we're just going to have to wait and see. As always, my name is Jeremy. This is The Force Fandom. Guys, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. Remember, the Force will be with you always.
You want to fight? Or you want to win? Going it alone doesn't cut it anymore.
Maybe you should tell him yourself.
Maybe you should tell us where you've been.